Alex from Better Speech, a speech and language pathologist, and she's going to share some tips, tricks, and insights when it comes to speech issues, language issues, and where your kids should be from the time they're born until they get into school. So, Lenora, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate this topic. I think it is it's a little near and dear to my heart currently, and we could get into that a little bit. So thank you so much for sharing some of your time with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so great to be here and spend time with you.
Well, I'm happy to have you. So let's go back to the beginning. How did you become interested in speech and language pathology?
So I got involved with Better Speech actually about 2 years ago. And so now I am the chief knowledge officer with them. And we're actually over 150 speech language pathologists that are across the nation, and we're also international. So we were able to provide online speech therapy services to people of all ages. And I actually got involved in it when I needed a speech therapist when I was younger. And I also worked with a child that had special needs as I was a babysitter. And then as it just kind of went on and on, once I got into college, I did attempt nursing, and I absolutely love nurses. They're phenomenal, phenomenal people. And it just was not my forte. So I switched over to communication sciences and disorders. And here we are, fast forward a number of years later.
Dun, 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 dun. So what exactly do you do as a speech and language pathologist?
Absolutely. That's a great question. As a speech language pathologist, a lot of people will think like, oh, well, there's nothing wrong with my speech. Why do I need to work with you? And it's not only speech. So when we come into talking about speech and language, speech is our articulation, our voice, and our fluency. Language is actually two parts. It's the receptive component, our ability to hear and understand the information, and then the expressive component, everything that I'm doing as I'm talking. This is the expressive component, how I'm using the vocabulary and how I'm producing grammatically correct sentences and formulating from that standpoint. But in our career field, I like to say we work from the neck and up, because I've actually worked in the NICU with little babies for feeding and making sure that they can safely organize and safely consume nutrition. And we also work with little ones who have any type of oral motor weakness where they may not be able to manage their saliva, or they may have difficulty chewing food. So we do see people for swallowing, and we also see adults for swallowing. And then as we go through we see people for their ability to interact with the language and socially communicate. And also with adults, a lot of the time we'll see people for Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, neurological difficulties such as a stroke. So it's really quite from the neck and up is our field.
At all the ages, it sounds like. All the ages and stages of life.
Very much so. Very, very much so. I think my youngest was probably 35 weeks. They were born at 35 weeks. And my oldest, she was 104. So I've worked in a variety of areas. Yeah.
Dang, that really does cover the gamut.
It really
little bitty babies and
yeah, and she was quite intact when I was working with her. So I've worked in a nursing home. I've worked in inpatient and outpatient facilities and hospital settings. So really, we cover quite the area.
Absolutely, that sounds like a lot. So is your approach different with any age group?
It would depend on what are they presenting as. So as a clinician, what we want to know some background information. So like what's their age, what are their difficulties, and in regards to working with people online, we do ask them for background information. What are you seeking a speech pathologist for? How might we be able to help you? So then when we start to interact with people, we have a better idea of what they're looking and what they're looking for, and how we're able to provide help and the service and care that we do.
Okay, so it all depends on like the diagnosis. So it could be a little bit different, depending. And then approach would change. A 2-year-old might not be able to do what like a 32-year-old could do. So, okay. That just popped in my head.
Great question.
What makes Better Speech unique?
Better Speech has actually been online since long before the pandemic. And I love that we're able to provide speech therapy services to as many people as possible. So because we're online, we are able to provide services to people who live in really rural areas. But also because so as a clinician, I am a board certified speech language pathologist, which means I have the credentialing. I went to school and I passed my boards, and I am certified by the American Speech, Hearing, and Language Association. Now, when I work, I'm actually licensed by the state of Pennsylvania, plus I'm actually licensed in 4 other states. Now, the beauty of that is when I work online with people with better speech, I'm able to I have clients in Colorado, I have clients in South Carolina and in Florida and in Pennsylvania because I'm where I am licensed. So I'm able to provide services to people that I may never have worked with directly. And the fact that we can actually match people up as early as the very next day is something we're very, very proud of. If you go to an outpatient clinic or in a school setting, you might be waiting 3 months to 6 months just to get the evaluation and just to work with a clinician. And I don't know if anybody's like me. I roll over at 2 a.m. with lots of questions. The sooner I can get to a professional, the better off I am. So we're able to actually offer a free 15-minute consultation on our website. So all you simply do is go to betterspeech.com, little bubble pops up. Hey, how can we help? And you can schedule time with a clinician immediately. And we can better guide you on if services may be warranted or how we can connect you with a clinician. So we're very proud of that.
That's pretty awesome and very accessible. Like you said, like rural, city.
Oh, yeah.
Makes it pretty easy from the comfort of your own home. Wherever you might need to go. It's pretty awesome.
Absolutely.
Can you tell me a little bit about like misconceptions around speech and language that you've come across that you'd like to kind of debunk?
That's a great question. Misconceptions. Oh my goodness. Lots of them. They're actually for speech therapy. People are sometimes a bit hesitant, or if their child may need speech therapy because they feel like there might be a stigma or that they did something wrong. And when I'm working with a family, the first thing I always share with them is that you did nothing wrong. There's nothing broken. You didn't do anything wrong, and you're not a bad parent and you're not a bad guardian. And to really just allow it to be, this is simply where we are, and we're going to help you get to where you want to go. And how can we provide service from that standpoint? And another one is, a lot of people will say speech therapy online. How does that work? And the state that I live in the state of Pennsylvania, they're still in their outpatient settings. They're still in masks. So even with a shield or some type of mask in place, it can be really hard for that little one, especially because now they're trying to work through the things that are covering their face. So the fact that we're online and we're able to provide speech therapy in the comfort of their home, in the environment that they're most comfortable in, is absolutely fantastic. And I love that we are actually able to be there with the parent and the guardian and the client when we're providing speech therapy services. If it's with a child, if it's with an adult, obviously the adult is there. But in the outpatient setting, they're still separating parent and guardian, and student or the client that we're working with. And then I can't explain as much as I would like to the parent or the guardian about why I'm working the way I'm working or what I'm doing and how to apply it. When we're online, you're already in your own environment and I can actually see where you are. Your child is already comfortable and I can explain how to make it functional and what I'm doing while I'm doing it. So when we're playing games on our platform that we actually have at betterspeech.com, I can give them assignments or homework and they can play games, but we can make it really functional. This is this game. This is how you play it. This is why it's targeting this sound, or this is why it's targeting this language component. And building skills.
I think that's really important that you say that too. Like if a kid can feel comfortable in the environment, because, going to a doctor or going to anybody that's outside the home can be really,
Completely.
Yeah, they can get scared, they're apprehensive, anxious, they might not answer the same way, they might not do things. But if you can give directions and have responses or whatever it is, like, and the kid can, be present and feel like safe and secure, then you're more likely to get somewhere than if they're scared or feel like they're going to be wrong or have the incorrect answer. Like, everybody's like watching them, that's a really good point.
Yeah. Yeah. I absolutely love that.
I think this is important. Who can be impacted with speech and language issues?
That is a great question. Who can be impacted? Anyone and everyone can be impacted. It's not necessarily, it affects this population most, or this is the age bracket that we're most concerned about. Because we are born with the ability to understand language, we're wired to be able to want to communicate, but we also need to be, as the guardian and the parents of those children, we need to put that foundation of language in. So it has to be learned and experienced. We don't come in knowing what a ball is. We don't come in knowing what a telephone is. We have to experience the language. And that's why it's so important to keep talking to your children. I usually tell people once they find out that they're pregnant, I'm like, great, keep talking. And once they're born, keep talking, because what you're actually doing is you're narrating their entire environment. You're explaining what you're doing. You're explaining why you're doing it. And when you pick them up out of the crib, you're telling them what they're doing. Or we're going to get in the tub and we're going to turn on the water. And it can seem, what some people would say, excessive. But truly, they don't know what's going on. So you need to explain it to them and to share that ongoing information. And as you do, what you're also teaching your little ones is how we use the language. We don't usually think about, oh, I should change my tone when I'm going to ask a question or when I'm going to tell you something. We don't really notice that too much. We just naturally do it because we've learned how to do it. Little ones, they have to learn how to do it. And the best way that they learn is by experiencing it and experiencing our language and our interaction. Especially, I often tell people, focus on face-to-face interaction, because 70% of our communication is nonverbal. So to really and this was a very big deal when the pandemic first hit, because we were taking little ones and we were covering their face, and we were covering our face. And there was a lot of social isolation, where they would have heard sounds in a grocery store. They would have seen things on the playground and interacted. They would have had friends coming over to the house, whether it was parents, friends, or whatever the case may be. They would have had much more social interaction. And because of that lack of social interaction, the mind and body still continue to grow. But it's really important that we show these little ones, this is normal social communication. These are sounds, these are vocabulary, and really going back and making sure that they understand these very important language components.
Oh, that's so interesting. You know that things are impacted during the pandemic, but you do forget how much of communication is nonverbal, and just reading body language and all those little cues. Yeah.
The need for speech therapy. The need for speech therapy actually has gone up quite a bit from the pandemic, because like I said, our mind and body has evolved over years and years and centuries, and it did not pause for the pandemic. So if there is a concern, especially at any point, if you ever have a concern in your little one's development or at all, time is of the essence. And especially during that period, the mind and body were growing and neurons were firing and wiring, and it didn't stop just because the rest of the world stopped. So it's important that we do go back and we make sure, or go forward, making sure and helping those little ones really understand social communication, because they missed out on a big chunk.
That's a really interesting perspective too, because like you said, neurons are firing, wiring, and especially for like little ones, 2 to 5, 2 to 6, like there's, what do they call them in Montessori? Like it's not impressionable ears, but the absorbent ears are hypersensitive. Like you're learning how to interact with people. And my kid goes to a Montessori school, so that's what and that's what and Montessori, it's hard to it's hard to rewire things once they've kind of fused. So we forget that.
Yeah, absolutely. Our brain is actually, we're picking up so much information from birth, even from before birth, but that brain is continuing to grow, which is why it's so important for that language to go in, and for that those experiences to go in, because by the time they get to 5, 6, and 7, they're much more what they would refer to as hardwired. And what basically that means is that it's not that change is impossible, and it's not that learning is by any means impossible. It's just that there are pathways already in place. So it's important to offer variety. And sometimes you'll hear adults say, like, it's hard to change. And it's not that it's hard to change. It's just that it takes a bit more work, because your brain literally has a record of experiences. So this matches or this doesn't match.
That's really... Oh man, that's really good insight. I mean, because you can take it, you can apply that logic to so many different places. But I will not go down a rabbit hole. Not yet. I'm trying to keep myself focused. Is there any age where certain speech and language issues arise more so than others, or I guess they're more visible or
That's
audible?
a great question. I would say, for at least for me and my experience, they do have commonalities, but I wouldn't say, I always have 7-year-olds with R's. It's just, where my personal experience and caseload may be at the time. Sometimes there are commonalities. Boys have more difficulty in certain development versus girls, but I wouldn't say, because it's a girl, she has no problems whatsoever. I would never say that. It just is how it appears is how it appears, and here's how we can help.
And speech and language issues can present later, like even in adulthood, or maybe there's something you should have gotten taken care of that you didn't know to get and take care of, kind of thing.
Absolutely. So with receptive language, when you're hearing information, when you're understanding information, that comes down to how do I know if there's a receptive language difficulty? What does that look like? If your little one can't follow commands or is having difficulty following commands, or when you ask them a question and they're quite literally having difficulty understanding the question, or if you request something from them and they're not sure, if you say, okay, go find your teddy bear, and they go to the stuffed animal corner and they can't figure out which one is their teddy bear, that's an identification. They can't sort for that information. So that would present as a receptive language difficulty. Or if you say, okay, it's time to go outside, let's put on your socks and shoes, and they start to go maybe outside, or they're not quite sure where their socks look like, and they're very unsure of the information that's being asked of them. That's a receptive component. For expressive language, can they identify things? Can they name things? And usually we'll see that nice language bloom from 18 months to 24 months. Usually is when they'll start to have some words by that first birthday, but really that blossoming and that development of naming things on end and talking, wow, they just started talking overnight. Somewhere between 18 and 24 months is what we typically see. And some people are ahead of it, some people are slightly behind. And it is what it is. And if you have concerns, absolutely always reach out to a professional. But as they're talking, what you want to hear is they're going from one word, their approximation of one word, or their attempt at a word, and then it'll continue to build. So instead of, they might not come out and say, I want my bottle, please, or I want my sippy cup, they're going to go, ba, ba, ba. And that's their name. That's their attempt to indicate to you that's what they want. Or when they say ma, and then they start to go mama, that's a build. They went from a consonant vowel to a consonant vowel, consonant vowel. So mama is a building on that language. And then as they get to 2 years old, you'll start to hear that combination. Instead of just more, it might be more please, their attempt at more please, or where mama, and they're asking a question and they're asking for the person, where did mommy go? And that's how it continues to build. And then they move into 3-word combinations and 4 words. And usually once your little one is about 4 years old, and they're typically, most of their grammar is really, really clean, and they're able to communicate. So what they would consider a non-familiar listener can understand what your 4-year-old wants. A good indicator is if you feel like you're translating for your child quite often, because other people can't understand them, that's a good indicator that you may want to seek out speech therapy services. Or if you start to see them isolate and turn away from social engagement because other people don't understand what they're saying, it's frustrating for them. Or even behaviors where they start to really act out, that's another indicator that they might need speech therapy, because it's frustrating for them not to be able to communicate. Wanting to express ourselves, our wants, our needs, our thoughts, it's very, very natural. And that's the intention. We want them to be communicators and intentional communicators. So if you're seeing those signs that they're not communicating, or they're not really vocalizing to you and indicating to you what they want, those are definitely red flags for delays in language development. When you start to get into 10 years old, when you're like, oh, my kid speaks great, the flags that we're seeing for that one would definitely be, can they tell you a story? Can they tell you what they did that weekend? Can they tell you what happened in school? And what I see often is, yeah, I had a good weekend. Yeah, it was a good movie. Yeah, no, nothing good happened. And it's very surface. It's very dismissive and they don't elaborate. Versus, oh, you watched Star Wars. What was it about? And seeing if they can tell you the characters. Can they recall the information? Can they tell you what happened in the book they read in a storied sequence, in an appropriate sequence? And if you're thinking, I might not follow the story, it's probably because they might not be able to really give you that cohesive story and all those details in the appropriate sequence. And those are some things that you would see in older kids who have their language skills to an extent. They just don't know how to effectively communicate storylines and what actually happened. And that's really, really important.
Interesting. Is there anything like that can present in an adult that you might not see in youth?
It's always possible, especially with people who have experienced COVID, that brain fog, and not being able to really attend to a task. What we're also seeing is decreased attention in adults. But there's a variety of things that go into it. It may be COVID related, but also it may be simply from being overwhelmed and constantly stimulated from other things that quite literally we can't keep our attention. Especially, I know for me personally, I used to wear an Apple Watch or a watch that would give me alerts. And even when I didn't wear it, I'm flicking my wrist thinking I had an alert. And it's just a different sensory, something else trying to take my attention away from what I was doing. So being able to focus and to attend to a task is really important. And some people may say, I can't focus at all. And as you're talking to them, what you'll notice is that their conversation is all over the place, that they can't, they can't maintain their topic of conversation because they're completely all over the place. The brain really is having trouble focusing.
So is being able to focus on someone, is that a learned behavior? Like that we have to train our brains to do that?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So when you're little, when you're playing with a toy, especially for little ones now that they're sitting up and they're engaging with you before they're verbal, what you want to see is that joint attention of toy and person that they're interacting with. So if you're playing with a ball, they'll come to the ball, they'll pick it up, they'll give it to you, they'll interact with the toy with you. Or if it's a pop-up toy and something pops up and it surprises them, they're going to look at you for that attention and to see if you're seeing what they're seeing. That's an attention and an engagement component.
Okay.
So absolutely. And being able to maintain that attention and focus once you start to have these interactions with, you'll see peer-to-peer, so child-to-child interaction, but also how's their interaction from child to adult? Do they change their social skills? That's a really important component. Also, are they able to listen and engage? We call it moving the conversation forward. Are they able to ask appropriate questions? So let's say you're at the kitchen counter and you're cooking something. Will your little one come over and ask, what are you cooking? Why are you doing that? What does that do? And that is, I know the question why people are like, oh my goodness, my kid never stops asking why.
Yeah.
But it really is a great thing because they're trying to piece together what's happening, and that's them focused, and they're looking at you going, okay, she's doing something, they're putting something together. How else? And they're trying to organize it in their brain. And that's a good thing because they're focused on the task and they're moving the task. They're moving the conversation forward when they ask you questions.
Got it.
So it's a very, very good skill.
Oh, okay. Interesting. I was just like, maybe that's why I'm not a good focuser sometimes. I haven't practiced enough.
That as adults, absolutely. And I think as just from being an adult, and especially an adult that now has a smartphone. I mean, when I grew up, I didn't have a phone until I had a license because it wasn't a thing back then. Once I was able to drive, I had a flip phone, which probably goes to show you my age. And and once I got a smartphone, especially with the alerts, the great thing with technology is it can be used for good. The other caveat is that it's vying for your time. Yes. Technically, when they create apps, they want you on the app. They want you on there for as long as possible. And, especially when you look at certain media components, they will hands down tell you they want you on the app because it's good. That's how many likes, and that's what it's about. Keeping your attention and focus. What's happened, especially with certain apps, because they're on a flick, they're on a swipe really quickly, but they're showing you information in short bursts, which quite literally takes your attention and zaps it. And you're attending to your app, but your actual focus is about like 10 seconds because that's all these videos are. So it's microdosing and zapping your attention. So if you're going to, as an adult, if they're wanting to increase their attention, it is their attention. You have to intentionally increase your attention and truly give yourself those boundaries of, I'm going to focus on this, and this is what's going to occur right now. And and you'll notice your brain is going to want to pull you somewhere else, but it's only because it's now wired to constantly notify you like, hey, we need to be doing something else. It's only a relearning of a habit, or a new learning of a habit.
That's interesting. I mean, because when I was in college, that's when Facebook came out. Smartphones just started getting popular. I think I had Blackberries, and by the time I graduated college,
we had MySpace and stuff.
Yeah, I was on MySpace. Ooh. Oh, the days. I wish we could. Yeah, let's put the songs back on. That was way cool. But I almost feel like it's like a learned thing to, I feel like there's a lot of ADD and ADHD, which is, obviously an attention disorder. And you're just like, oh, no wonder we're all triggered.
Pretty much, like, pretty much. We've now definitely become a culture where we constantly feel like we have to be busy. And if we're not busy, but are we busy with important stuff? But at the same time, now we're being, I want your time. I want your time. Here's a notification. Here's a notification. Constantly stimulated. Yes. And it's interesting. There is an advantage to technology, but there is, just with anything, there's two components to anything. And the important thing, and I'll hear a lot of parents and even a lot of adults say, oh, I'm being bad, I have to put my phone away. Versus saying, especially if you're with your children, oh, let's look this up, and show them that there is good in technology. Just like we didn't keep the TV on 24/7 when we were younger. We didn't keep the radio on 24/7. To understand that there are times where it's completely great and it's so appropriate. And hey, let's look up this information, and showing them that technology can be used for good. Yes, you can't really argue that constant notification is stimulating you and taking your attention, but you can find ways to use it for good and use it to your advantage.
Yeah, I love that you said that, because I do that with my son Declan a lot. He has a million questions, like, and what this kid's interested in. It's like he wants to know about colossal squid, which is one of the most understudied sea creatures on the planet. P.S. By the way, how do I know that? Because I've tried to look up the colossal squid for the last year and a half, and he's obsessed with this thing.
That's awesome.
And so basically my point is that he asks a lot of questions that I do not have the answer to. And probably, 5 to 10 times a day, I have a list of things that I need to look up so we can find out more information about them. Because Tommy doesn't know.
Absolutely. And when I have school age kids, and I'll ask them, especially if we're doing something like storytelling, or I'm having them read something that they're learning about, and I'll ask, oh, do you know what this means? No. Okay, great. Great. Tell me that you don't know what it means. I'm not going to shame you or put you down. I love that you told me. Tell me anytime. And we look it up together rather than you go look it up. We'll look it up together. We'll talk about it, because when they can engage and experience and have that back and forth with somebody, it lasts so much longer, which is TV is great for educational purposes, but it's a very receptive component. You're just watching something. You're not interacting. When you're teaching, when you're reading with somebody, when you're sitting down and doing a project together, it's a physical experience, and they have this back and forth, and you have this dialogue, which is so fantastic and so vital for our communication and our social ability to interact in the world.
That's crazy. That's awesome. Never knew that. Look at me learning things. Woo-hoo! Look at me learning things. Now let's get into some causes of speech issues. I mean,
that's great.
Just go crazy.
Go crazy. Sometimes they are developmental, or they're even generational. So, if you had difficulty communicating when you were younger, your child may have difficulty. It's not a because you did, this one gets it too. Not that at all. Communication, you can be born with difficulties, or they can just develop over time. Sometimes, especially little ones that are born with neurological impairments, they're going to have a harder time communicating.
Right.
And it's simply because of the way the system has grown and developed. And it's not impossible by any means. It's simply we approach it from different angles. So for a little one that may have difficulty, let's say feeding, okay, they have quite literally difficulty maneuvering their tongue and their teeth and their jaw and their articulators. And that may simply be where they are, and we can work on that. And they might not be coming out with full sentences, but we can absolutely still work with them. Sometimes you'll see fluency difficulties that arise. Now with fluency, it's quite interesting, and I absolutely love fluency. If let's say your 4-year-old is doing a great job communicating, and they start to go to school or daycare or some type of program, you may see a change in their fluency. And sometimes what can happen with little ones is they get so excited and they have so much to tell you that they literally cannot get their words out fast enough, and that their brain is moving faster than their mouth. And you'll see periods of disfluency, and it's very normal. If it starts to last periods of time, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, that's a longer period of time, and that's something you would definitely want to consider speech therapy services, or reaching out to. You can reach us at betterspeech.com for that free 15-minute consult. And
well done, well placed.
Shameless plug. But truly, because it's when you have those questions, it's so important to speak to a professional, because your mind can just scatter with those questions, and it's really, really important to be able to reach out to somebody and say, here's what I'm seeing. Fluency. So some things like that, they might go away in 3 weeks. No problem. If there is a big change in their environment, let's say a sibling was born or they moved to a different school, something happened where they can actually develop disfluency because it was such a shift in their normal and able to be certain and experienced lifestyle. It was a really big shift. So sometimes we'll see disfluencies that occur. Other things that develop, even that storytelling, that sequencing, they may have the language, which is great, but can they predict what's going to happen in a story? Are they able to understand those and make inferences from that storyline? Okay, well, what do you think is going to happen next? Oh, what might they do? Problem solving, reasoning through, coming up with more than one solution is really important. So these are cognitive things that are really foundational to move through life. And how are they able to effectively communicate and problem solve and engage and socially engage? Sometimes we'll see social difficulties, and that can be really hard. They might feel really isolated and not be able to socially interact in school, which can be very difficult if you go to in-person school and you feel like you're alone. Yeah, so we see lots of different things.
Lots of different things. And for just from like my experience, my son had a lip and tongue tie when he was a baby. Yeah. And it's kind of newer-ish. I would say, like, I don't know. I'm a millennial, so whatever the end of the generation before me, and like it's become a big thing now because we understand that this tiny little piece of tissue in our mouths are attached to like our top lip or under our tongue can make such a big difference in speech. Just not being able to, and swallowing and drinking, and you can it's crazy how this just little bit of thing can impact a million things down the line.
And sometimes they'll grow out of tongue ties, and sometimes, especially for little ones, when they have trouble latching, if they're latching onto the nipple or if they're latching onto the bottle, whatever it may be, it can be because the tongue is tongue tied. It's just tighter in the mouth. And sometimes they do loosen. Sometimes they do need to be, modified through a procedure, and that's completely appropriate. It's just, it depends and where that person is at that point in time. Sometimes they won't even know they're having difficulty until maybe their sounds are coming out strange, as in like they might not be able to move their tongue back high and tight for their R sound. And there's 30 combinations for the R sound. So it's really interesting to see how that works. But then they also have to relearn how to swallow, and they have to relearn how to speak. So there is a modification period after a procedure.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a very fascinating thing to experience for the first time mom. I'm like, huh, how about that?
Who knew?
Who knew? I didn't know. What? What do you mean? And then I was talking to a dentist, that's slightly off topic, but she was saying, like, that could impact like you might grow out of it, but you could still have speech issues down the line. And then she was saying things like sleep apnea can be, and you're just like, really, off this little tissue? Like, really? Like, it's just,
completely. Sleeping is especially for people with sleep apnea or sleep difficulties. It is so important to be able to sleep. And, sometimes, especially in my 20s, I would joke like, yeah, I don't need to sleep. I have caffeine. Nope. You need to sleep. What's actually happening when you sleep is that your body's going through a cleaning process. And it's so important for your cells to go through this cleaning process. And there's so many studies that say like, really strong sleep are actually good sleeps are connected to neurological difficulties as you get older. That's why it's so important to really honor and respect the fact that your body needs rest. People may be different, but it still is going through a cleaning process.
Right. You might need 4 hours. I might need 8, as long as whatever we need, we're getting. That's what's important.
Yes.
100%.
Totally.
I like how we're advocating for sleep in this too. Now, something that's connected and very important to success, but obviously you have to good speech foundations and is reading. Without understanding words and language and all that stuff, you can't read. So let's talk a little bit about a reading timeline. What's typical? Where should parents be concerned? Those kinds of things.
That's a great question for reading. I like to encourage people to just continue to offer reading as early as possible. So when you're reading to your little one I was speaking with one woman and she told me she had delivered twins and she's like, I didn't know what to do with them by the 3rd day. She's like, I'm here, they're asleep. So I sat there and I read my book out loud. And she just got in the habit of reading to her children. And I thought that was so great because you're offering such an incredible vocabulary to them as you're reading stories to them. And you're also offering different pictures and voices. So many good things come from reading. And there's lots of different reading programs. And it does to come down to, depending on your child, a lot of people will tell me like, oh, my kid's not a reader. It's just the worst. It's a terrible experience. And what I like to encourage people to do is find ways to make it fun. Yeah. And you can ask your kid, okay, what would be fun? How can we, and ask them, how do they like to learn? Some kids like the audio and the visual going on together. Some people just like when you read with them. However it is to make it fun and engaging, because the more fun you can make it, especially if they know, oh, this is our time. I get one-on-one with you, or I get individualized attention, or I get this motivator at whatever it is. And we are absolutely motivated by certain things. So if I do X and Y, I will get Z. And how do they want to learn? And how do they want to engage? Reading is absolutely a great skill, and finding ways to make it fun. So if they're like, I don't want to read. Okay, well, let's warm up to the idea. Let's go book shopping and take them and go to a bookstore, whether it's, a recycled bookstore or if you end up at a Target aisle, whatever the case may be. Find things to make it fun and as engaging as possible, because that way they're starting to understand you didn't ask them to sit down and read a 60-page book all at once. Right. And, oh, okay, well, let's go discover stuff. What do you like to read about? Maybe it's sea creatures. I love that squid that he wants to learn about. And opening the door that way and opening the experience in a good, positive way, because that way you'll make it fun for both of you versus we need to sit and read. We need to sit and read. That can be really nagging. And I myself sound really nagging. I'm totally in agreement with that. But how can you make it fun? And even if you're like, okay, well, let's have a reading blanket. Let's have a reading chair. And then that way they know this is the time that we're going to do that. They know what to expect, but also that it can be fun, and finding ways to make it fun. If you want to both sit down and oh, let's get our hot beverages because now it's winter, at least by me.
Cold in Florida today. It's like 60 degrees. Okay.
I think it's like 30 here. It's very cold.
I'm so sorry.
And my heater blasting on me. And finding ways to make it engaging like that, or even once you start to write and have fun with it, be exploring of it and open to anything that they want to do or you want to do. Oh, let's go online. Let's look up some things that we can learn about other people and how might they like to learn. That looks like fun. No, that looks like a terrible idea. Great. I agree with you. That looks like a terrible idea. Let's try this one. And seeing how they want to approach it, because especially for readers, as they start, it can be frustrating for them.
Yeah.
And really pointing out, oh, that was a great try. I think it makes this sound. And even as you're introducing your letters, or, this is the letter T, it makes our t sound, or even going around and writing on cards, this is the door. This is how we spell the door. This is our da sound. And that way they're just immersed in it, but in a non-threatening way, and we have to do this. It's much more enticing when you can make it fun and enjoyable for them also. And those are definitely some great techniques to at least just approach the idea and have grace. Allow yourself that space to say, you know what? We're not going to solve this problem in 3 weeks, and that's okay. You might, but if not, that's okay. It doesn't have to be solved tomorrow, and it doesn't have to be solved by the end of 2022. It is simply a journey, and approach it rather than a sprint.
Right.
Marathon. Take your time. We'll take the scenic trail and enjoy it.
Funny.
Try to make it as fun and enjoyable, so that way you're, as the parent or the guardian, looking forward to it too, and get creative with it. Because if you're not going to look forward to it, they're going to pick up on that.
Yes,
absolutely
they do.
They do. They already knew when you were not in a good mood. But at 10 months old, they were like, "Oh, something's wrong.
I'm not coming up. I don't.
Yeah, and it's just emotional intelligence, and that's a great thing. So when you find things to make it fun for you and ask their input, what do you want to do? How should we do it? Well, I want to bake something. Great. Reading is involved in baking. And you can find ways to make reading involved in a very non-threatening way and in a very enjoyable way.
So I like that you say that. I think that there's so much in childhood, especially early childhood, that we want to compare and hit a milestone.
Oh yeah.
And some
That's
kids are reading at 4, right? And some kids really don't get it till 7.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine, she's a reading coach. She's a literacy, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, has her master's in something. I don't know. And she sent me this thing. And Lenora and I have talked about this a little bit. My son goes to Montessori, which is all supposed to be about, guiding your kid at their pace to hit certain things. And he always wants to read. We read to him every night. We let him pick out, at least 2 books, and then we'll pick out a book depending on time. Yeah. But he always gets 2 books every night. And then he has a little notebook that he likes to carry around and write in.
That's awesome.
But he's not really writing anything, and his letters they need some work.
That's okay. That's okay.
There's a lot of opportunity for growth there. But
see how you make it fun, though.
Yeah, right. So I'm I gotta learn more about this damn colossal squid. Fuck. I'm gonna get that done. But I think making it fun is really important. And I think for my kid in particular, he's struggling with reading. So his teacher thinks, even though, it's a Montessori, who cares when he reads? I find reading very important. So of course I'm worried about it. But I don't think he's engaged, like you said. I don't think he cares about rainbows and butterflies. I think he cares about krakens, which is another name for a colossal squid. If you guys have, there's kraken.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So there's
a rum
company.
Of the Caribbean?
No, we tried to have him watch it the other day, and he was too scared.
Yeah, it's kind of creepy.
We found this show. Oh, see, here's my rabbit hole. I'm going on a tangent. Going on this show called Santiago of the Seas, and it's a pirate movie.
Okay.
Not a pirate movie. It's like on Netflix. It's like a kid's show. And, Santiago is Spanish, and he has like a little his first mate, Tomas, which is his primo, his cousin. And then his best friend or whatever. And so he's like enthralled, and he's like waiting for the Kraken to come in each episode. But yeah, it's just crazy.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I'm like in this like weird space. I'm like, okay. We actually did. This is not a plug, but we did do a call with Better Speech because, like you said, getting into I did my what's that intro call?
The consult.
Yeah, the consult. I was like, what's that called? And we have to follow up to get him screened. But yeah, it's kind of hard to get a 4-year-old screened during the week when he's in school all day.
Yeah.
So we're trying to figure that out. But
awesome. We have different times. It's
right. Exactly.
And I know because it's December, but the nice thing is that you can make it on your own schedule. Mm-hmm. December is just chaotic for, I think, most people.
Everybody.
Right?
Everybody.
But we can absolutely accommodate that time for sure.
Yeah. It's just, I always say to my husband, like, I'm really worried about this. And, you're trying to like get him to read and like do all the things, but you don't want to change too drastically and all of a sudden like have him working on like letters and numbers and like trying to read words and remember, because let me tell you what, that kid remembers a lot of shit that he wants to remember, but he doesn't care that rain and bow make a word. He doesn't care about that because the rainbow does not take down the ships on the sea. Okay, pirates and colossal squid through that.
That's awesome.
So it's been this like whole thing as if
you might be onto a reading program. The Brianna reading program. Mama knows reading.
Colossal squid. There you go, kids. And it's funny that I started making cards, like put around the house. Yeah. And I'm like, he's not going to care about these. I'm going to have to get like sea star, and
you're
shark
offering.
And
cuddle. It's a great thing. Oh my gosh. It sounds like so much fun over there. Like you're offering. So even if you're like, they're not going to care about the word toilet,
right,
door, but it's still offering. And the great thing is that it's in their visual field. And because it's there, it'll just be a bit more active. So he might not be overly engaged in how to spell the word rain and then bow, but it's still present. And he'll start to make those connections. And neurons that fire together, wire together, and it's a great thing. So once he starts to understand squid, he might start to understand sliding door as you're getting those S's in there. See?
Yeah. Oh, okay. Gotcha. All right. So for parents who might be Superman, great. Now we're in little Spidey. Not even like real Spider-Man, little Spider-Man. Anyway, I can't. Yeah, it's like, I don't know. It's called Spidey and His Amazing Friends. I'm like plugging all these shows, and I really wish I was getting a kickback for it.
You're welcome.
I mean, the Santiago on the seas, I do have to say, is really cute. And they do like Spanish phrases. Mm-hmm. So they'll be like, vamos, mateys,
That's awesome.
And, like he said something the other day, and it's like, they're gonna go. It's like rapido. I can't remember.
Oh my god, that's
the
awesome.
phrases, but it's all about you're getting like these little tidbits of Spanish, which I think is really
cool.
It.
Oh my god, it's great.
Anyway, when should parents intervene or seek reading support?
Oh, that's a great question. If you're noticing that they're now starting to have it in school and especially interact with your teachers and the other professionals that are working with your child, because they're seeing things that you may not see.
Yeah.
And that's a great thing because they also have perspective. And it's not that even if your kid's behind or something, it's not that you're a bad parent. It's simply, here's information just so you're aware. And it's much easier to be able to open those lines of communication of, hey, this is what I'm working on in speech, just so you know. And it's not that there's anything wrong with your kid and we're not saying they're broken or shame on you. That this is simply, this is where we are. This is what I'm working on. Is there any way I can help support you? And that's a great thing because when the parent or the guardian does say, hey, what's going on with this? What it's also helping is they're keeping an eye on your kid too. And that's a great thing. That's why you have them there employed at that school. That's a phenomenal thing. and they have different perspective because your kid who's at home with you is not the same kid who goes to school. It's the same kid, but it's not the same kid. They have different interactions that are going on, and they're going to interact with an authority figure in a school environment and their peers in a completely different way versus when you're there, which is why when they go to grandparents' house, they have a completely different interaction versus, you know better, you don't do this at home. So it's just how they experience life and how they're working to grow themselves socially and skill wise. And that's really interesting too. But when it comes to reading, reach out to the professionals and see what ask them, what are you noticing? And also, I think YouTube is a fantastic resource. Don't look at it as your kid should be doing this already. It's like going to a buffet. Here's a whole bunch of food for you. Enjoy what you'd like, pick at what you'd like, and try it. If it works for you, great. If not, that's okay too. You know, sometimes when people offer information, people will take it as like, this is the only way. It's not the only way. There's lots of different ways. My way may not work for you, and that's okay. That's why we're different. What will work for you? How can we help?
Yes.
And approaching it from, do I like this? Maybe, maybe not. And going from there and seeing if that reading approach is right for you, or that learning to write approach for you is right for you. I know letter people used to be huge, and I don't know if they're as popular at this point in where skills have advanced, and how other people, especially at a Montessori school, they might like to introduce it in another way. It's just exposure to it, and be keen on focusing what works for your child. What are you noticing? And there's so much going on. Don't be afraid to write it down and say, okay, we did this today and this went well. We did this the other day and this did not go well. Because you're going to start to notice commonalities and what's working and what's not working. And that's a great thing.
I like that you kind of brought it back to like one of the first things is everybody's unique, you know, and here we are trying to like put everybody in, you know, a little silo that we don't all fit in those silos. So why shouldn't approaches be? And I do see it from like an educational perspective. It's really hard to have a classroom of 25 people with 25 individualized plans. Like I understand that, but equally every kid has different things. And if someone's a little bit ahead, maybe they should get a tougher thing versus someone who's a little bit behind, you know? So, and someone might excel at math who's not going to excel at history or social studies. So it's you have to have that nuance approach to it, I think. But again, you do. You have to be flexible. I think, well, there's a metaphor for life. You know, that is so true, but in so many ways, like you have to be flexible. You have to leave like a margin of not error, but for opportunity. When it comes to speech and language issues, or difficulties, I guess is a better way to put it, is it ever too late to seek support?
No. Always. If you ever have concerns, and I don't think any clinician in the profession would ever be like, sorry, girl, lost cause, goodbye.
Nope. Oh, that'd be awful.
Not going to happen. Exactly. Because it's just not going to happen. I would always say especially because when you have somebody, if they need more speech and language therapy beyond, maybe it's not just articulation, maybe it is just articulation, but when you work with somebody and if it doesn't go well the first time, keep going. Look for the clinician that's right for you. It's just like if you were going to hire a coach for yourself or a therapist for yourself or your doctor and you don't have a good experience. That's okay. Keep going. It's not once and done. It's okay. You're just not my therapist. You're not my clinician that's right for me. I'm going to keep looking and look for one that has a really great rapport with my child or a really great rapport with me. Because when you have that connection and you have that rapport, you're going to have that much greater growth. And that's a fantastic thing. A lot of the time they'll be like, oh, well, we just stopped going. We didn't like them. And it's like, okay, great. But how else can we help? Because we don't want you to be there struggling and not feel supported. That's a terrible way to experience life. Yeah. We want to help. And every person is not going to be a fit for every person. And that's perfectly fine. Which one is the right fit for me?
Yeah, that's another good point. And you're not the first professional to say, like, I think we forget that sometimes. It's like, it's hard to find someone that you vibe with, and especially to find someone that gets your kid. So you got to keep trying. But it's finding the right fit. And you got to kind of look at it as dating. You know, you didn't give up. You found your person, right?
That's a great analogy. Oh my gosh.
Right? Like you got to keep dating, and you're never going to get there. So whatever it is you want out of life.
That's a great one. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Here's another thing I just thought of. What is like, how do kids give like clues or insight to their learning style and needs in your experience?
That's a great one. They'll never come up to you and be like, I really like things presented auditorily to me. They're not going to do that. But you'll notice if they're really engaged in, what did they say? And it's actually in their language. If they're listening and say, I didn't hear what they said, or if they're saying, I didn't hear what they said, or if they're really listening and focused and then asking questions from that information, that's a great thing. If they're looking at the visual and going, if they're hearing you and they don't understand, but then you give them the visual, they're more going to be learners of who are visual. Okay. We are all a combination. So we usually have auditory, visual, tactile, kinesthetic. We're a combination of them. You're never going to just be like, oh, I'm only visual. Your primary might be visual, or your primary might be auditory. Your primary might be kinesthetic, where you literally have to be immersed in the experience. Yeah. And you have to have that visual and that auditory and that tactile component to really experience and to really understand information. And I was definitely one of those. I needed a ton of information coming in because it just wouldn't stick if it was auditory, and it might not always make sense if it was visual. But once I had the experience, I physically was able to lock it in, and it made much more sense.
I get that. Okay, so they have to listen to the cues from them if they're saying, okay, I like that. That's
that, and then even, again, don't hesitate to write anything down. I love pen and paper. If you're like, hey, this went really well, I want to remember that this went well. And it's just a quick note for yourself. You're not presenting it to anybody.
Well, and then just like people who might not know this, but I think it's becoming more common knowledge now. Women in particular remember things better. It's been studied if they write things down, like physically with pen and paper. Yeah. So I still have an old school notebook so that I don't forget things. I'm not going to reach across my desk and grab mine, but
completely. Exactly. Because when you, especially even if you had things like journaling or a gratitude journal, and just, when you want to write things down, to write it by hand. Yes, it goes in when you're typing and you get some feedback, but there's what happens when you physically write it and you put your pen to your paper. Your subconscious registers it differently because it recognizes the handwriting and it recognizes how you're writing, and it absorbs that much more into you. Whereas typing, it's very generic. We've seen emails and text thousands of times. It's not personal. When you write physically, it is personalized to you.
That's awesome. I didn't know that. So where can people find out more about Better Speech?
Betterspeech.com. Come visit us. Follow us on social media. All these glorious links. I feel like they'll be in the show notes. We're on social media. If you guys have questions, I love questions. So leave them in the comments or reach out to us. Send us emails if you want us to present on something specific. But if you have questions and you want to speak to a professional, by all means, please contact us at betterspeech.com. We are there for you. We will help you every step of the way as much as we possibly can. And really quick side note about our sessions. What I absolutely love is that we can go session to session, or we can go by the month, so that you get 4 sessions within the month and you have it scheduled. So it's repeating if you would like repeating sessions, or if you're like, I don't know if they need sessions, that's okay too. Reach out to us. We can provide you with an evaluation, and that way you have more information, and that's a great thing. And then also, if we do have sessions, you get to be on our platform and play tons of games and have it really interactive, which is awesome. And you can make it fun, and it's not this boring drone situation. It's really interactive and fun, and there's a great community on there.
That's awesome. Is there anything else we didn't know we needed to know?
Oh, that's a great question. You and I could sit here for hours.
I know that's the problem.
Oh my gosh, I had such a great time with you. I think we're good for now. But if you have questions or if your audience has questions and you'd like to do this again, let me know.
I'll let you know. Awesome.
Let me know.
Well, Lenora, thank you so much. Again, Lenora Edwards from Better Speech. You can find them at betterspeech.com. I'm the mom who knows not. My name is Brianna. I hope you had fun learning something you didn't know you needed to know.